Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this AdFocus live conversation. As you can see, things are no longer what they used to be. My screen is doing funny things. We're having a conversation with the AdFocus Partnership of the Year, 2019 Partnership of the Year award winners, Faheem Chaudhry, who's the managing partner of MNC SAATCHI ABEL Johannesburg, and Darren Hampton from Nandos, who is their digital marketing expert. And we're having a conversation about what is this new normal that we are living in and what is it that advertising, how does advertising change and adapt to the new world post COVID? As we go out of lockdown as South Africa next week, I think a lot of businesses coming back on stream, a lot of the economy, and a lot of talk about economy. Looking at the global economy, advertising is said to be about to lose something like 1.3 billion US dollars in just over this period in COVID. And South Africa is going to be no different. We're all worried about how the economy is. And we have experts here with us today to have a conversation with us about how is it that they are adapting. Chaudhry, Mr. Chaudhry, Fahim, welcome. Darren, welcome. And I think the first conversation to be had, the first place to start is the partnership between agencies and their clients. How is that going to change? And how important is a good relationship between a client and its agency going into this new way of being in advertising? Chaudhry, you start. Fahim, you start, please, and then we'll come to you, Darren.
Awesome. Morning for me. I think an important reflection is that strong foundations aren't built in crisis. I think they're tested in crisis, and I think a lot of what you do when times are smooth, dictates how you're able to navigate when they're not. So, I'm sure a lot of agencies will be experiencing that with clients. I think all the basics of strong partnerships in mutual respect and trust, understanding the value that each party brings, and really, for the lines between agency and client to be, quite blurry, for there to be extensions of each other, I think is actually really important at times like this, because we're all working separately. So we're all as far apart from each other as, clients are from each other, and we are from our agency colleagues. And so, building that bond and before this time, I think is a large part of how well you're able to keep communicating and keep being effective during this time. So just a couple of thoughts.
Darren, the restaurant business, both takeaway and sit-in, has been kind of a very big focal point in South Africa and our economy, because during lockdown, you were unable to work. And even in level 4, as you've still been unable to work. And even going into level 3, sit-down restaurants are very, very much affected by the way that the government has responded. How has that changed the way in which you communicate and how you are spending your advertising rand?
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been boring over the last 2 months. I think as a restaurant industry, like you mentioned, level 5, we had to shut down completely, and dealing with that is in itself quite tricky. In that you don't just close the doors and lock up and that's it. There's a process to go by, and so I think initially our focus was certainly around. It was a family-first mentality, and Nandos is a family-owned business. So I think that was our immediate priority, and to look at what measures and structures do we need to put in place to ensure that every Nandos staff member is paid in full during the lockdown period, as well as our suppliers. As Faheem mentioned, as it's the people that make the chicken, and our suppliers are very much part of that, of who those people are. So I think that was our immediate priority. Moving into lockdown 4, we were able to trade with delivery, and that comes with its own pros and cons. In that delivery is in reality a very small percentage of our business, and it's the most expensive way for any restaurant brand to serve their food. You've got costs, delivery drivers, you've got delivery bikes, you've got online platforms, you've got packaging. So the financial feasibility of operating under just delivery was fairly limiting for us. And we had to make a difficult decision not to actually open, even though we could over that time. Instead, we looked at opening up a handful of restaurants to aid in feeding schemes, because I think that was a very real need, and still is a very real need in a lot of the communities that we operate in. So that was interesting in terms of a shift of strategy, and I think looking back at it now, we've fed over 55,000 people. So having the ability to do that, I think was a change in focus. And then during this time, and as we kind of enter into level 3 and we're able to trade in a variety of different channels, we've used this time to focus on developing our online assets and our online platforms to cater for a natural increase in demand as people can only through order online. So a lot of our focus has been around the Nandos app and introducing new channels via that.
So the online conversation is one that I think every marketer, every strategist, every business leader is one that we're thinking about very deeply, and kind of thinking, how are we going to leverage this new online existence that everybody is in? But in a country like South Africa, that online has a lot of its own challenges. And how are you then, Faheem, as a strategist and a marketing strategist yourself, what are the aspects that you think we can leverage and quickly ramp up as marketers and communications practitioners to be able to connect with our customers, even though we can't sell directly to them, like as Darren has said?
Yeah, I think I think you hit the nail on the head, which is for Nandos, for example, while they were physically closed, who were unable to drive exact sales, the brand lives on, and so the stores might be closed, but the brand lives on. And I think what we saw when level 5 was announced was just the outpouring of actually, I suppose, love for Nandos, and people online saying, please don't stop your activity. And that really does speak to my first point, which was that didn't happen because of comms in the crisis. It helped because of really investing in the brand over a long time and understanding its power during these times. So I suppose my one observation would be, to do that, to understand the power of brand to get you through these times. Then in terms of engaging with people right now, what's interesting is to see the media behavior slightly change in people's consumption. We're not out on the roads, so we're at home a little bit more. So you've seen an increase in TV, you've seen an increase in online video and social media activity. And I think you've got to map that, against the population. Some parts, will be watching more TV on traditional channels, and that offers you an opportunity to have yourself heard. And others will be watching more video, but that obviously comes at data cost, etc. So I think it depends on the brand and who your audience is. But there are certainly opportunities for more impact now, because behaviors are fixed versus in flux, which sometimes is harder to find people. Right now, you know exactly where people are. So there's good opportunities that, hope most of the time. And that's a good media opportunity actually to be more meaningful to people. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, but actually I'd argue a little bit easier to predict right now.
And just a quick reminder for everybody that's joining us in the chat, that you can send us messages in the chat if you've got questions that you want to ask. And I have got it here in front of me, and I'll pose the question to the gentleman. But speaking about, Faheem, just speaking about TV and knowing where everybody is, Nandos actually grew as a brand very much based on the back of their very strong, very witty, and most of the time irreverent TV advertising. Is this going to be a resurgence of the traditional media, or is online surging ahead and we're never going to catch up? We're never going to go back to the days of big TV ads?
Is that for me or Darren?
Anybody, anyone. Darren, what do you think? I'm going to pose it to Darren because he is the online guy.
Yeah, I think that's been big marketing question over the years. I think our experience is the introduction of digital and particularly social media is that it's allowed us to practice the principles of what made Nando's famous back then in a slightly different way. So I think it hasn't shifted our focus away from traditional channels, because, you know, from a reach and from a capability point of view, you know, that still has a fundamental role in our marketing. I think the advent of online has allowed us to have two-way conversations with people, and I think we've invested a lot in talking with people and not talking to people, and that's the benefit of the likes of Twitter and like I say, social channels. So I think as a marketing mix, whilst digital is certainly seeing tremendous growth in terms of percentage of share, it remains one of many components that we play in launching campaigns going forward.
Two-way conversations is a fascinating part, because one of the things that we saw almost overnight, it looked like every single brand had nothing to say to its customers, because over the past couple of years, with big data and analytics coming into play, all brands were spending a lot of time kind of talking about ROI. So a lot of people spent lots of time spending on products, selling their products. And now, Faheem, you were talking about how this is more of a brand building job. How do brands remain relevant and top of mind when they are not allowed to sell their products?
Yeah, I think you know, it's a great question, and one that I'm sure lots of people are experiencing and thinking through. I think the answer lies in really being clear on your brand. I think the brands who have a really clear direction, clear propositions, know the role they play in customers' lives and probably in society more broadly, are very comfortable in what they need to communicate right now. I think it's when that hasn't been thought about or hasn't been invested in, and you no longer can sell, then you've got no lever to pull. You end up doing sort of generic COVID kumbaya type of work, which
Stay home.
You know, has a role to play, but mostly it might be to create memes to entertain us. I think, you know, it's so clear that the need for a clear proposition and a clear brand right now. I look at, you know, Nandos. I look, you know, globally at what Apple and Nike have done. They've been able to have a really clear role that they play within COVID without sort of falling into the trap of what everyone else is talking about. And so, yeah, I think it's clearer now more than ever the need for a clear brand, and also the need for creativity. I think I've been fascinated to see how, you know, creativity has been a coping mechanism for people at home. You're seeing CMOs, you know, doing TikToks with their kids, and you're seeing also, you know, wonderful stuff. And I think it's you know, I reminded lots of my BCom friends from varsity to say, imagine lockdown without books, music, art, entertainment. And now you'll understand the value of the arts. It is fundamentally a coping mechanism for people. So yeah, I think now more than ever, invest in creativity.
I think what to add on to that, what I find particularly interesting was in China, who are obviously arguably ahead of us in terms of the life stage of the disease. A lot of brands that have come kind of back and reinvested in marketing have received quite a bit of backlash from society, in that, you know, you were quiet at a time where potentially people you wanted or needed to hear from you, or you needed to be an active member of society. Now, you know, when you can profit and it's all about, you know, the commercial gain, all of a sudden you're back in action. So it's an interesting dynamic to try and play.
Yeah, totally.
For as long as I've been in this game, we have all been always marketing to what everybody likes to term upwardly mobile. The upwardly mobile, everybody is going to earn more. And that's how we have pitched all our strategies and pitched all our brands. But globally, everybody is, for the first time, at least in my lifetime, downwardly mobile. The global economy has gone down. We're speaking about how the ad spend is shrinking as well. What are some of the strategies that marketers should be, and Faheem, this is a question for you, should be thinking of employing and kind of looking at in terms of understanding that the pocket of their consumer has gone down over the weeks when we have been in lockdown? We're just spending less. We're spending less because we're not in the malls. So how does a strategist or a communication specialist look at this environment where everybody has less money and pitch their strategy and product in that environment?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question for me, and I think one that not just that we're thinking about here, but globally. I think ultimately it comes down to the pie has shrunk and will continue probably to shrink for a period. So what are you doing to still get your slice of it? And it really does come back down to being super clear on the value that you add to people. I think we're not moving to a space now where brands can afford to be superfluous or sort of lofty. I think you've got to be really clear on the value that you add. And I know we've been Darren and I have been discussing with Nandos around the offers that they will bring to the market post lockdown will be thinking of value in mind and what they can bring to people. So I think it's really important to look at it at a few levels. Firstly, at a brand level, how are you relevant to people during a time when pockets and purses are tighter? The second is that at a product level, to go, what out of the suite of what you offer either has more resonance now? And the third thing would be, where do you need to pivot into maybe launching new offers, new innovations, and new thoughts based on people's new reality. And so I think that sort of agility around being able to move with the reality, not finding yourself stuck in the cement, I think will be a big determinant on how successful companies can pivot to the market reality, I suppose.
Darren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think spot on. And as Faheem was saying, I think that's a lot of the conversations that we're having around in the background. I think as a marketer as well, and I suppose it's more of a business question rather than a marketing question, is what requires a knee-jerk reaction versus what requires just stability. And the strategies that have been put in place over the 12 months haven't catered for something like this, but they're about long-term thinking and long-term perceptions that you create within the mindset of customers. So whilst there are immediate short-term things that ultimately have to change, because cash flow changes and just the nature of the environment has changed, there are certain things that I think are worth sticking to, and purely from a marketing point of view is arguably investing more in marketing at a time where that is needed. So I think those are the kind of discussions that we're having in the background as well.
Investing is a good word to use because we're talking about stretching the rand. And I'm wondering, for him as a leader of a business whose key product is really talent. That's what you're selling, is you're selling the best brains, the best solutions to your clients. Where are you investing and what kind of skills are you investing in, looking at the world that we're looking at right now in terms of the people you're bringing in, the people you are upskilling, and how and where you are investing your talent money at the moment?
Yeah. So, the starting point for us as we enter this period was around what we're doing to, keep and secure existing talent. That's the starting point for us to go, periods of uncertainty, etc. is really important that you first start with looking after your people. So a lot of our focus was on how do we ensure that we keep everyone in the agency, all the talent that we have employed, and how do we protect income so we don't have to have any impact, which we've successfully done. And that was around, reprioritizing cash flow and really just relooking annual targets. And I think your values as a business become quite clear quite quickly in these times. What are you willing to compromise on? Darren spoke to them being a family business and reprioritizing people. So that was first. It was before looking externally at other talent. Protecting current talent was the first responsibility. The second thing was then a discussion around continued growth. And that was really a strategic discussion that we had as leadership. And our view was it's a time to lean into talent and to invest in talent. Firstly, as a responsibility as an industry player. But secondly, that clients' needs haven't changed. They've in fact intensified. So you need to bring in talent that can help clients. And if we do that in the short term, I think the long-term benefits will be there. So, every Wednesday we have a staff breakfast where we sort of catch up as a full staff suite. And one thing I was reflecting on with the team is to say, there are people who have started in our business over this period who we've never met in real life. We looked at their CVs digitally, we interviewed them digitally, and we hired them digitally. And so when we go back to the office at some stage...
And they have no office to come to.
No. Laptops were dropped off and plans were made. But when we go back to the office, we'll meet some of our colleagues who we've hired over this period, never met before. It's going to be a sort of strange reunion because we're working together already and familiar with each other, but we've never met. And so that's been really important for us, is that we continue on that path. In terms of new skills and new expertise, I think that's an interesting question. My view is that it's important not to knee-jerk into thinking that crises require completely new skills or new abilities. I think it's about really diving deep and investing in the ones that we know clients have always needed. Strong strategic thinking, the ability to bring them creative ideas that can help them in this time. And so that's what we're doing. There's a much bigger question around where our agency headed overall, crisis or not. What new talent you need to invest in. If we can talk about that. I think that is ultimately about deciding what kind of agency you are and what is the role you want to play. We're so good at helping clients with their propositions, and I don't think enough agencies think of their own. What is your brand about actually? What are your reasons to believe as an agency? And I think that the best example of where I think it's headed was David Golding. He's one of the founders of Adam and Eve DDB in the UK. He said, he thinks the future is going to be agencies who contribute to culture and agencies who create collateral. And there are both sides, and one needs new skills a lot. It needs deep data analysis, and you see the management consultants getting into that space and buying up a lot of creative agencies. And the other side is going deeper into creativity, which is as things get more competitive, as markets get more clustered, as people are more and more overwhelmed by information all day, how do you stand out and how do you really differentiate yourself? So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But we're certainly pushing much more on the culture route and using technology and new skills to fuel creativity, not to direct it or to tell it what to do.
Well, there's a question from Mongezi on the chat speaking about technology and data. What sort of insights and data are brands and agencies investing in during this time to be more engaging as restrictions are eased? Darren, let's start with you and then we'll come to Faheem. What kind of data are you investing in?
I think the most valuable research, I suppose, for us at this point is just getting an understanding of what is important to South Africans. Like, what are people feeling and thinking? What are people worried about? What are people excited about? Because once you have a really good understanding of the psyche of South Africans, you're better placed to see what need you can fulfill as a brand and where you can plug in. So a lot of our time has been rather spent on that type of research as opposed to transactional data, which at this point it's pointless looking at sales rate because there's not a lot of that going on. So that, I think, number one, has been very, very helpful and very important for us. And like I said, we are forced to innovate and bring in new channels. So another channel that we've brought in now is something called curbside collection, which is more on the transactional side. So it gives the ability to someone to download and order on the Nandos app, and then collect at a restaurant where we bring the food out to your vehicle. Now, there's a convenience side to that, but that was born out of a necessity at this point, in that social distancing is important. So just understanding and looking at the data of how people are using that and adopting that new, I suppose, way of doing things has been very helpful in how we craft where we focus our energy as a business.
So the thing about how we all feeling right now is South Africa is not new to any of these feelings in terms of the anxiety of huge social upheaval, in terms of not knowing what the future looks like. This may be around this particular pandemic, but as a South African society, in the 90s when we were transitioning, we had a lot of similar feelings, kind of in the mid 90s and in the early 2000s with AIDS as a huge pandemic and not knowing how we're dealing with it was. So these feelings for us as South Africans are not new. But South Africa is such a diverse market. We're diverse in terms of people, in terms of cultures and languages, and also economics. How does that make a difference to the way that you are currently thinking about how you are servicing your clients, Faheem, just in terms of strategy? And also for you, Darren, just in terms of a premium brand. You are a premium brand, and this is a question also asked on the chat earlier. How do premium brands look after this kind of challenge that we are sitting in and straddle it so that they are able to succeed?
I'm happy to jump in first. Yeah, I think there are a few parts to that question. The one is around navigating this feeling we're feeling at the moment, and that it's more of a familiar feeling. And I think that's actually it's spot on. And I think when you look at how South Africans have spoken about and behaved during the lockdown, stress and tension and upheaval is not new to us. So there's a bit of muscle memory, I think, that's kicked in. And you're seeing people coping in various ways. You're also seeing the fact that circumstances change more than people do, I think. So, everyone's going, what renewals are going to be, but you'll see on Monday at the bottle stores that, people will be ready to rock back into behavioral patterns previously. So it's easy to overestimate change during this time, but in truth, circumstances change a lot more than people do. I think in terms of navigating just the pure breadth and diversity of the country, there are a few important things. The first is to from an agency side, to have people and a staff complement that are as reflective of that as possible. And obviously there are recruitment challenges and transformational challenges in the industry that are ongoing. But certainly you want to bring in a diversity of thought into the agency, so you never feel like a bubble or disconnected from parts. And I think the second bit is about consciousness, which you've talked to already, understanding that South Africa is a country of complexity, diversity, and never falling trap into certain narratives. And that's one of the challenges of social media and the bubbles it creates. And so one of the best tips I've heard was you should go and follow 50 people who have as different points of view from you as possible on Twitter. Not unfollow people who you don't agree with or don't like the views of. You should lean into that, because that's the only way you're going to learn. Now that drives people mad and
Have you not seen the wrath of Black Twitter?
Well, exactly. Twitter gets deleted and re-downloaded on my phone often. But it's an important thing, I think, is to keep perspective of difference from yourself. And brands understand that, and infusing that into your marketing is the only way you can really drive success in this market, not having blind spots.
And Darren, for you, I mean, Nandos, even though you are technically termed as fast food, you are a premium brand, and premium priced brand? How do you kind of straddle all of this completely different and diverse consumer challenges that you have?
I think straddle's the right word. I think it's at a time like this, it's the balance of where speed versus craft matters. So from an innovation point of view, often speed will be more important than the actual craft of it. You just need to get something out to facilitate a demand, for example, that customers may have. So it might not be the perfect experience that you could put out there, but at this time, it is, it's as good as what it needs to be to suit the job. I think on the flip side of that is where craft is more important than speed. And to your point, I mean, Nando's over the last 31 years has been famous for high quality, fresh ingredients, flame grilled peri-peri chicken. And now that comes with its own challenges in that, if we operated a frozen product, it would be much easier for us to stockpile a whole bunch of product behind the scenes, and that when we do get the green light from government, which it can happen, overnight, as we will experience. It's not something that you have a long lead time for. We could go that route, but in upholding the values or what makes Nando's unique, I think craft is more important there, and rather take the time to ensure that you can get fresh quality ingredients in what you're known for before opening the doors to the public. So I think where it's important not to compromise, and people and product is vital. That's what makes the business. We keep that strong, and where we need to be agile and get something out in terms of messaging or innovation, speed is prioritized there.
So this is, I'm going to squish together a question from Marina and Sipokazi on the chat, and it's about expectations of the consumer. South Africa, we're one of the countries that have really championed very strong kind of corporate citizenry in the way that we expect our corporates and our businesses to interact and live with the communities in which they operate. What is the best way, in your view and your experience, for a brand or for a business to live up to the expectations of their clients and still be able to kind of pivot? When we look at, Sipokazi makes the example of Louis Vuitton, for instance, and how they've started making masks, or SAB, who spent some of their money making hand sanitizers. How can a business kind of match those two things, the expectation of their customer and the market, as well as making sure that they remain relevant and, as you say, Darren, true to their business? Faheem, do you want to try that?
Sure. I think it points to a need to really be, authentically know what business you're in. I commend all businesses who are making masks and who are, helping with hand sanitizer. I think that's part of just being a conscious corporate South African business. We've seen overseas other governments being able to play a massive role in helping the country, but the truth is we are reliant on the private sector to help people through this a lot, and you've seen that in donations. So for us, the way we're looking at it is the importance to prioritize acts over ads, and that's really the thought is, simply going out there with a brand message around let's stick together and let's be there for each other is great if it's meaningful, but is that money perhaps better used doing something? And then what you can do is advertise the act in an authentic way to go, we understand what everyone's going through, like what Darren spoke to, feeding schemes and things like that. So I think it's important to prioritize authenticity over trying to get a quick win. I think it's not the time or the zeitgeist to get quick brand points. I think that'll be spotted and called out quite quickly, and really to get involved and stuck in, but in the way that makes sense to your business. Brand purpose has been one of the big talking points in the industry for a number of years now, mostly because it's brand purpose in ways has become synonymous with doing good. And that's led to a lot of sort of inauthentic sort of marketing attempts, toilet cleaners saving the whale and strange things like that. So I think it's important to understand what you stand for as a business and then authentically act on that, as many are doing actually in SA, which I think is great.
And Darren, do you have?
Yeah, I think what's unique about South Africa is that unlike first world countries where there is a national budget surplus, they have cash reserves to keep the country going during a lockdown, whereas South Africa, we have a national budget deficit. And I think it's not a luxury or a nice to have for the private sector to get involved. I think it's a necessity. And the funds, examples of that, where government and the private sector have come together, like the Solidarity Fund, for example, are good examples of creating a vehicle where people can get involved. And to Faheem's point, where you can credibly play. So, as a restaurant brand, what we can do is we can contribute and support funds like Solidarity Fund. We don't have to create something new. There's a vehicle there already. So we've actively got involved with that. And, what we do best is food. And there's a very real need and for to get involved in hunger relief, as an example. So that's a natural link that we can jump in. But there's a lot of examples, and the variety of industries that we have. There's more than enough need out there to get involved, and I think it's crucial. You have to.
What then is this new normal? What does it look like going forward for him as a business, as a communications business, post-COVID and post-lockdown here in South Africa? What does it look like to be agile, to be able to quickly respond and remain authentic in terms of a strategy, in your view?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is it's tempting to play into this sort of futurist predictions game, and I'd caution against that, because if we listen to 2010, we'd have flying cars now, not grounded planes. So
I'm still upset. I'm still salty of the fact that we didn't get our hoverboards a la Back to the Future.
Exactly.
Still salty about that.
To brother Elon about that, see what he's cooking up. But I think the way we're thinking about it is, likely to see maybe 3 stages. The first is this feeling of release. I think we've been sort of kept at home, and like you said, South Africa's had pretty strict restrictions. So I think as and when people can just get out for that quick release, I think you will see that happen, starting at bottle stores on Monday and continuing, I think, when barbers and salons are able to operate as well. I think you will see that purchase pattern, that quick release. I think then you might go into a step of sort of renewal, where people get back to how life was, getting back into old habits. I think it's going to be, even just socializing is going to be a really interesting thing. Not having done it for 3 months, are people feeling more introverted now? It's going to be a really interesting behavior to observe. But I think there'll be a period of renewal where people sort of readjust, and then some sort of reset where I think we will see some behaviors and some patterns change and refresh. And what I'd personally love to see is more, a focus on local, on supporting South African businesses, on supporting South African tourism, all those type of things. And I think the sort of the patriotism, but also just the more humanity that we've seen during this time, I hope will continue as a pattern. I think a lot more people have been conscious of actually things can equalize you pretty quickly. And in South Africa specifically, we might be, very divided in income, but everything is connected. And there is a need to be more aware of that as we go ahead. So I think those 3 stages will be interesting to look at in terms of behavior.
Before I come to you, Darren, there's a question for Faheem from George about consultancies. That now I know, Faheem, you started one of the MNC consulting businesses. how do you feel, or what do you think of consultancies buying up ad agencies? You mentioned this a little bit earlier, and just looking at, I mean, I think Accenture, in the past 3 years, have their biggest part of their revenue stream has comes from communications. How do you feel about that?
It's something I've thought about a lot, and it comes down to quite a core thing, which is who understands the customer best, because there's so much data available within businesses, but also within consultancies, and it's all about the battle for the customer. So who is going to be able to best own, interpret, and then act on the data to the most meaningful way? I totally understand why consultancies are buying up agencies, because it just lengthens their value chain in a business, and they've already got an incredible client list. So if they can add communications onto that, wonderful. I think where the challenge is understanding the nuance of creativity, of running a creative business, of creating the climate for creativity to thrive. And I don't think the consultancies have got that right yet. The one I'm most interested to see is Droga 5 and Accenture, as one of the best agencies in the world being an Accenture. That'll be interesting. But equally, you've got, a Wyden and Kennedy who say, we will never sell, and the founders have written it within the policy of the business that it can never be sold. So there's that interesting battle. I think consultancies will win in the sort of customer experience game and in bringing data through every touch point. But I think agencies will always win in creativity.
So Darren, Nandos is one of South Africa's, I think, most favorite kind of good news stories in terms of making it abroad. And I remember a couple of years ago when I read about the Nandos generation, when there were riots in London and they blamed the Nandos generation of kids. I thought, well, these guys have made it, all the way from Louis Botha, as we were talking earlier, all the way to now even into America. Is this the time for the small guy to steal a march on the big guys, do you think?
I think yes and no. I mean, you've got the notion of support local, which we were talking about earlier, and I think there is a increased level of consciousness around that sense of community and being able to support your local industry, and it's highlighted with the borders being shut. It's highlighted the importance of the local industry as a whole. So I definitely think there will be a consumer consciousness around supporting your small independent and local brands. The bigger global brands, I suppose, are a massive economic force within the economy as well. So with over 10,000 staff as part of the Nandos brand, for example, in South Africa, that's a sizable economic role that the brand plays. So I think there's pros and cons. Whether it will swing one way or the other, I doubt it. I think there's just a new level of awareness and consciousness as to why I support a particular brand. And I think from a brand side, I think that's important to be aware of and to factor in, I suppose, in the way that you communicate and what you communicate.
So AdFocus turns 30 years this year, almost as old as I am. And I think over the past 30 years, one thing is for sure, that the South African advertising business has been able to punch far above its weight and size all over the world. Do you think that this will continue being the case, given that here in South Africa, the lessons that we have learned, and Faheem, you said earlier, these feelings of anxiety and change and social upheaval are not new for us. Is this an opportunity for ad agencies, both digital and traditional ad agencies, to kind of reclaim the spots that they've been losing over the past couple of years in terms of being number one and showing the rest of the world the way in terms of how we can make communication, long-lived communication, even in the post-COVID world?
Yeah. I think one thing I found fascinating when I went to work overseas for a few years was how much I missed uh, the journey of working on a brand strategy, on a campaign strategy in South Africa, because you have so much tension and so many things to figure out. It's quite boring actually overseas, where there's a lot of precedent and you sort of pivoting in theory. There aren't those real tensions. So we're really good at that. And I think that is why we punch above our weight, is that we have fertile ground for creativity to solve and to soothe and to lead conversations in. So I suppose my guidance and my focus would be on to use this. We have really good, we've come through so many different hurdles over time, and brands have always played a really interesting role in South African culture and leading conversation and shaping it and moving it forward. And there's no time like now where we need to continue to do that. So I suppose my appeal to the industry would be to keep on going in creativity. And my belief is when times are good, you should advertise. When they're tough, you must advertise. Because otherwise, how are you going to be remembered? Fundamentally, marketing is about stimulating demand, and you need to stimulate demand now as businesses reopen. So I think we'll continue to punch above our weight because we have the creative firepower. And also, African creativity is enjoying a global renaissance, and it's being celebrated across the arts, across music. Advertising is one of the streams. In architecture, there's much more awareness. Oprah's got Nelson Makamo behind her when she's doing her Instagram lives. That's something. And I think it's actually a hot moment for African creativity overall, and advertising is part of that.
Yeah.
And Darren, in terms of, we spoke earlier about partnerships, and you and your agency won Partnership of the Year last year with AdFocus. What then are the most fundamental, hey, stop it. What then are for you the most fundamental aspects of making that client agency relationship work and help you weather the storm? What is it that you are hoping your creative partners will do for you?
Yeah. Well, firstly, 2019 feels like 10 years ago. I think what has been interesting, and this time has highlighted it even more, there are two things. The one for me is a partnership, a deep understanding of each other's business, and not a deep understanding of your own business, because both businesses are having to make very real decisions about, cash reserves and people and, how we, contracts and all of that. And I think having a better understanding of what, how each business operates then allows you to kind of come up with a mutually beneficial way of doing things going forward. And that's relevant to the crises, but I think that's relevant in business as usual. So I think that's the one thing. And the other thing that stands out for me is empathy. I think the nature of the ad and the marketing industry is that it's people orientated. We're not buying a piece of software. We're buying people's times within an agency. So I think, this is a stressful time for people as individuals, and everybody's going through their own thing, not only, from a work context, but from a personal point of view. So I think having that as part of the partnership and a real understanding of who the people you work with and what everyone is going through, I think puts you in a better position to make the right decisions. It's not an easy thing, but I think it's a crucial thing.
Faheem, everybody asks the client, what do you look for in an agency that will make the partnership successful? And I think just as equally important for marketers and for communication specialists and agencies, you should be looking similarly when you look at your clients. You should be looking for particular synergies that will allow you to do the best work. So in this time, post-COVID, what do you think are the most important aspects of a client that are required in order to be able to weather the storm?
what's of real value and what gets you through these times is being a creative partner to your clients, not just their ad agency. Because the pressures that they're facing right now, the businesses, are hit hard first. And agencies have got to be able to level up to understand what clients are going through, not how ads need to change, but fundamentally, how is the business impacted? And then creativity becomes quite a powerful thing to apply to new problems and to different types of problems. And I think for what we look to with our clients is that partnership and that permission to be able to creatively solve with them, not just be sort of embraced when we need to talk campaigns, but and to really feel the business and what it's going through, so we can apply lateral thinking to those issues. And I think where we have that connection with our clients, we're able to do meaningful work for their businesses, and that ultimately is our role.
And what about kind of the old school brick and mortar? We're talking, even for us this morning, all working remotely, all digitally connected and distant from each other, but there's still lots of businesses that have the traditional brick and mortar. And next week, a lot of people are going back to the office. Kids are going back to school. What about those international companies that, and this is a question from Guguletu on the chat, who do have the brick and mortar as well as the digital presence? How can they leverage a local storytelling to be able to be relevant to their customer base, to be relevant to South Africa, and then also to ensure that their future, even as we go into a world where we look after our own, go into a future where they remain relevant for the customer? Let me start with you, Faheem.
Sure. So there's a few layers to that. I think the one is where you have brick and mortar. Obviously, there's massive challenges there, and I think we're going to have to look at how the sort of South African customer behaves. Are we going to see back to the mall culture happen or not? If you're in a position where you've already got omni-channel presence, you're already in a stronger position than many bricks and mortar only businesses who now are probably going, what does our online world look like? So I think to what Darren spoke to earlier, looking at the channels that are most relevant right now, which I'd largely assume are online, and look at how you can pivot and adjust those. And then looking at your brick and mortar space, and I suppose there'll be some hard decisions that need to be made based on how the market reacts. Is the scale of brick and mortar still needed? Or do stores need to be repurposed into new offerings or helping customers in different ways? Maybe one needs to add a service level to stores. It just depends on the category, the sector, and the brand. If we're talking food, there are only a couple of levers you can pull, and it's about investing in other channels. If you're talking about telcos, there's a whole lot of other things you could do with your physical presence. So I think it depends on the category. But if you're omni-channel, you're already better than many retail businesses.
So before we've got a few minutes left, but before we go, I know that you're both like professionals and you're both very well respected in your fields, but I want to know on a more personal level, how has your behavior changed in terms of your buying patterns, and what are you going to be doing going forward? Are you going back to the malls? Are you going back to business as usual? Are you going to be hanging out in those restaurants as they open up? Are you going to church? What is it that each of you are kind of doing going forward, and how has your behavior changed given the weird world that we're living in right now? Darren, I'll start with you.
Well, the other day when hardware stores were opened up, I found myself spending about 2 hours just roaming the aisles just to go to the house as well. So I think I think it's been a massive sampling drive for e-commerce in South Africa. So South Africa before lockdown was less than 2% of total retail sales were done online, and I think post lockdown, I think that's going to take a significant jump and sustain that. And for myself personally, you know, anything that I've needed immediately, you know, we've had to turn to online. So I think that's one thing. It was interesting. I was reading an article the other day around how people view head office. And again, it's a brick and mortar store, and you know, it's no longer a place where you go in and you plug your laptop in, but you plug in with people. And I think it's definitely, for me personally, highlighted the importance of being surrounded by people, both in a professional as well as a social space. So yeah, I can't wait to go and sit down at a restaurant and socialize.
Order beer, Faheem?
Yeah, totally. I think sure, it's been interesting. I think for me, the first few weeks were about, you know, doing a lot more sort of personal things, you know, even just cooking more. You know, I was sort of guilty of enjoying being out and about and you know, meeting up with people and etc. So yeah, there were interesting new behaviors, but I really do think you know, one of the adages in our agency is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, and I really do think I do think people will go back to their patterns. I certainly I'm hoping to do that, but I can't wait to socialize again and all of that. I think we naturally in this industry we are a bunch of sort of extroverts, and some of the old views of the industry of wanting to just, you know, eat together and party I don't think they've gone away. So I look forward to those.
So would your view be that brands and marketers should spend a little bit more kind of connecting in the old channels as well, and not just kind of completely abandon those? You know,
if we look at some of the past crises, even if you look at the 2008, 2009 financial crisis and the recession that followed, there's so much evidence that shows that the businesses who invested in brand and marketing during crisis, not after, really reaped the sustainable rewards. I mean, Amazon grew 30%, I think it was, in the last recession, and they launched the Kindle then, which completely changed an entire category. So I think it's important that businesses do know that, to Darren's point earlier on what's happening in China, people are really aware of the role brands are playing during crisis, and I think it's an important time to keep the brand alive. The channels, I think one's got to look at how behavior shifts and then adapt strategy accordingly. Right now, the stay-at-home channels are doing well, but as people become more mobile, that will need to change.
Darren, and for you?
Yeah, I agree. I think certainly from us, from our side, what's made Nando's famous over the last 31 years is serving up delicious flame grilled chicken in a unique contemporary African environment, you know, and I don't, you know, that has been true for 31 years and has been true in 23 different countries. So, you know, I think it's important that the focus doesn't shift towards novelty and newness. And whilst that's important, you know, now just for, you know, kind of short-term survival, being clear about what makes you as a brand unique and different and the role that you play hasn't changed and won't change. So, you know, absolutely innovate and spend that time in bringing in new things, but as long as that doesn't distract from what you're really good at.
I think with just a few seconds to go, we've got a shout out for you, Faheem, from Mike ABEL. And he's just, I think this is a good note actually to close off on, because he's also just saying, you know, a great saying goes, when two people agree on anything, you only need one of them. South Africa needs to start embracing diverse opinions more, and we can learn so much more from each other, grow and evolve, and make a better advertising as a result. And I think if anything, that is one of the things that South Africa has still to offer to the world, is we have got a very robust, a very resilient model here in South Africa, and that really does come from having an incredibly diverse environment and talent pool to search from. And that way, we truly, truly are stronger together. Thank you to everybody that joined us. That is, and I'm very cognizant of people's time, it's 11 o'clock. And if you were able to join us only in part, this whole conversation is going to be available on YouTube channels. I think you'll be able to get it through Red Zone, and I think you'll also be able to get it on the FM AdFocus page on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Faheem, for your time this morning. Thank you, Darren, for your time and your insights. You gentlemen are great.
So are you. Thank you.
Phumi?
Nice one, Darren.